Our next presenter is Claudia, who is going to be talking all about, I believe, the power of Polyglot notebooks, which is really cool because they just put out a blog all about this and sort of how the evolution of it. I don't want to take anything away, so I'm going to head over and go to Claudia.
Hi everyone, thanks for joining me at .NET Conf this year. Before we get started, let me give you a quick introduction on myself. My name is Claudia Reggio. I am a product manager here at Microsoft. I joined in 2020 where I was a product manager for Python data science and AI tooling in VS Code. And now I actually work for the .NET team on .NET Interactive, where I enable Polyglot notebooks within VS Code. So today we're going to be talking about the power of Polyglot notebooks. So for those of you who are unfamiliar, what are Jupyter Notebooks? Jupyter Notebooks are interactive programming and computational documents that mix executable code, equations, visualizations, and narrative text. If you've never seen one before, I have a screenshot here off to the right of a Jupyter Notebook. This comes from the open source project Jupyter, hence their name Jupyter Notebooks. And the main takeaway that I want you to get from this image is that Jupyter Notebooks are comprised of cells. They are not your traditional script where everything is just in one file. So here we have these two code cells where we have the input that has code, and when you run that cell, you get the corresponding output right underneath it. Then we also have the ability to insert markdown cells, which is part of that narrative text that I was mentioning, where you can actually explain what's happening within your notebook. So the ability to have all of these features in one file is what actually led the Jupyter Notebook to become the de facto tool for data science. Data science is very iterative and exploratory in nature, so the ability to have this file where you can use Markdown to tell the story and explain what, transformations are being made, and to be able to have code and visualizations and be able to iterate on them quickly and see the results makes it really, really the best tool for doing data science work. Now, because of that, traditionally, many people equate Jupyter with Python, or there is a very strong relationship between Jupyter and Python. But I'm going to show you what happens if we break out of that box just a little bit. So hold on to that definition of a Jupyter Notebook for a second. Let's switch gears and talk about what is .NET Interactive. .NET Interactive is an engine that is capable of running multiple languages, and sometimes I'll refer to them as subkernels. You may hear me use that interchangeably. So .NET Interactive today supports C#, F#, PowerShell, JavaScript, HTML, Mermaid, SQL, and KQL, which is Kusto Query Language. Now I know that was a lot, but bear with me. .NET Interactive has full language server support for each of these languages. Now, I don't even think that that's the coolest part about .NET Interactive. In .NET Interactive, you can actually share variables between the subkernels. Now, there is a small asterisk here. We don't support sharing between and out of HTML and Mermaid. However, the other languages listed do support variable sharing. So now, with those two definitions in mind, we talked about what is .NET Interactive. On one hand, it is an engine that can run multiple languages and share variables between them. Great. A Jupyter Notebook is an interactive document that can mix, code, visualizations, narrative text. Great. What happens when we put these two things together? When you add these two things together, you actually get Polyglot notebooks. Polyglot notebooks are really just multi-language notebooks. As I mentioned previously, traditionally Jupyter Notebooks have a heavy association with Python, predominantly used with Python, and understandably so. They've been traditionally used for the data science space. However, when you take an engine that is capable of running multiple languages and sharing variables between them, and you turn that into the kernel that runs the Jupyter Notebook, you now have a file where you can use the best language for the job in your workflow, and you will have fluidity between that workflow. You're not going to have to open different tools and different, files to be able to use the best language that you would like to use for the job. And you might say, hey, your gut reaction is, Claudia, wrapper libraries are a thing. You know this, right? I do know this. However, don't forget, .NET Interactive has language support for each programming language that we support. So that means auto-completion, IntelliSense, and syntax highlighting. So even when you're using wrapper libraries, you still may have to open a different tool to get that syntax highlighting and auto-completion and get that real grade A experience that you want when you're editing your code. And then when you're done, you may copy and paste that code into another tool if you are trying to use a wrapper library. That being said, there's no need to switch to that when you're using .NET Interactive in Polyglot notebooks. Okay. So now let me go ahead and start the demo. Let me start off by going to GitHub and showing you guys something really quick. So the first thing I want to do before we get started is actually show where the data that we will be using will be coming from. So it's actually coming from our repo, which is in the .NET org, and it's called the interactive repo. And if you come down to our samples folder, followed by notebooks and then Polyglot, at the very bottom, you'll see this GitHub repo milestone report, which is what I will be showing you next. And you can go ahead and actually download it and tweak it and try it out for your own repo. So now let me head over to the notebook. All right, so now that I've shared where you can actually download this notebook, let me tell you what you would need to be able to use it. So I'll reiterate this at the end of the presentation as well, but first you would need VS Code. You would also need the Polyglot Notebooks extension, and you will need the .NET 6 SDK. So once you have those three things and you open up this notebook, you should be able to use it, run it, and tweak it to your liking for your own repo. Once you open it, the first thing you'll want to check too is that you have .NET Interactive selected as your kernel in the top right. That's what's going to be responsible for running all the cells in this notebook. So let's chat about how we're going to show this report. So the goal of this report is to have an overarching idea of, how the engineering work is going, where the work needs to be delegated to. So we're going to go ahead and do that by pulling the milestones and displaying them, showing the milestone burn down, so how these issues are being tackled over time, what are possible completion dates for the milestone, and show the milestone work broken down by area. And what I mean by that is in our repo, we have the ability to add labels to our issues, and we call them areas. And so that will give us an idea of the type of issues that are allocated to each milestone. So to show you how we're going to do that in a little bit more detail, I've actually created a little flowchart using Mermaid. As you can see, that's dictated in the bottom right of this cell. So a bit more of a step-by-step explanation. I'm going to go ahead and gather the org and repo IDs. I'm going to go ahead and create a GitHub client. Then we can collect the milestones and the milestone issues. Then we'll process those issues. We can then calculate the burn down and then display the burn down and milestone work by tag. All right, so let's get started. First, let me go ahead and explain what's happening here in this first cell. So our first step is to collect the org name and the repo name. And we're going to go ahead and do that by using the value kernel. Now, what is the value kernel? So in .NET Interactive, we have the notion of the value kernel, which is, you can think about it as kind of like a global kernel where you can store variables and values in it. And then you can use that to share it into other kernels. Obviously, the ones that support variable sharing, as I mentioned earlier, HTML and Mermaid do not support variable sharing at this time. So to do that, we use our magic command, hashbang value. That's going to indicate that we want to use the value kernel. And we're going to send it a variable, and we'll name it organization. And that's actually going to come from user input. So I'll show you what that means in a second. When I run this cell, I can actually go ahead and type .NET because VS Code is asking for that input. And that is now stored as .NET. So the organization is now .NET. Then we'll want to actually share that value into C#. So we're going to use C# later to create the GitHub client and pull that milestone data. So we'll want to make sure that C# actually has access to that data. So to get it from the value kernel into C#, we're going to use another magic command. This is hashbang share. This says, hey, go ahead and share from the value kernel the organization variable and go ahead and send it to C#. And that's what's going to happen right here. So one way that you can actually check too that this is successful, if you go ahead and come to our toolbar, you can see we have the variable explorer. And when you open it up, let me expand that really quick. When you open it up, you see that we have two instances of the same quote variable. So we have the name is organization, the value is .NET, which is what I entered. And you'll see one was for C# and one is for the value kernel. And so when you're first starting out and using this notebook, you can also go ahead and share from the variable explorer. So if you come and you hit share, this will actually ask you, hey, I see that you want to share the organization variable from C#. Go ahead and pick which one you'd like to send it to. And then we will actually generate that code for you and insert a cell just like this. And then all you would have to do is run it. So that's a really simple and easy way to learn how to share. Next, we're going to go ahead and do the same exact thing with the repo name. As a reminder, our repo was interactive. So this is where I would type in interactive. And we're going to go ahead and share that too. And if you download this notebook and you use it, this is where you would also put in your org and your repo name to be able to use this notebook. Now I'm going to go ahead and grab my GitHub API token off my other monitor here really quick. And when we run this one, I'm going to go ahead and add that token. You'll notice that that one was not displayed, the difference being that here we're asking for input, so it would display. This one is a password, so for security and privacy reasons, it is not displayed. So now let me go ahead and move on to importing some packages that we're going to need in order to move on with our notebook. So installing some C# packages as well as some JavaScript visualization libraries here. So our next step is to actually move on and create a GitHub client. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. And reminder, we're using C#. And this here is validating that we are in fact using the GitHub API token, which confirms that we were able to share appropriately earlier. Here we're going to go ahead and grab the issues associated with the milestones as well as their states. So we're going to check if they're open. We're going to check which milestone they belong to. We're also going to take a look at the rate of the issues closed per day. And that's going to allow us to actually extrapolate. And we will be able to see if our milestone is at risk, basically not being completed on time. So let's go ahead and see what that part looks like. This is kind of a long cell, so let's run it and scroll on down to our output. But here, as you can see, we have two milestones. We have the VS Code extension GA milestone as well as the API stabilization milestone. And what this is showing us is that the milestone for extension GA is open, and so is the API stabilization one. The closing speed for the extension GA is 0.8558 issues per day. And the closing speed for our API stabilization milestone is actually 0 issues per day. This is actually expected because we as a team have prioritized our VS Code extension GA work first. So now we can go ahead and move on to this milestone data. So we can actually view this in a little table. This is going to show us some quick counts, show us the state is still open. There are 17 open issues. We've closed 23, which means we had a total of 40 in this milestone. And then, as I mentioned earlier, API stabilization has 8 open issues and 0 closed, which is expected because of how we've decided to prioritize our work. So before I keep scrolling down, I want to take a moment to pause and reiterate what we've done so far. Yes, you saw a tiny bit of Mermaid at the beginning, but this notebook so far has been primarily C# to create the GitHub client, to then pull the milestone and issue and state data. However, I promised you Polyglot Notebooks, so I'm going to show you what Polyglot Notebooks means right now. So we could try to visualize the burn down of the issues with C#. However, I think it'll be more beneficial to use JavaScript and HTML in this instance. So before we go there, let's go ahead and run this cell to calculate the milestone burn down. That's going to basically show the open issues declining, so we're closing issues over time. But to do that in JavaScript, I need to actually be able to share to JavaScript. So I'm going to go ahead and use the hashbang share magic command to be able to share from C# the milestone burn down data, and we're going to pass it into JavaScript. So let me run that cell. And now that we have that shared with JavaScript, we can actually go ahead and create this HTML div here in our next cell. And we're going to go ahead and actually use this JavaScript cell. This is the one that's going to be responsible for generating the milestone burn down visualization. So if I run it, and then scroll back up a little bit, you can see here that this is where the visualization actually renders. So you can see I have this Plotly graph that is fully interactive, and it's showing me the API stabilization milestone burn down as well as the VS Code extension GA milestone burn down. And this is showing the open issues and how they actually decrease over time. And again, this is a fully interactive output here. If you want to create interactive outputs in your Polyglot notebook, JavaScript is a great option. So at this point, our team might look at this notebook and realize that our date for VS Code extension GA is at risk. Moving forward, we can actually go ahead and scroll down a little bit further here. And I promised that we were also going to break our milestone down by area. So now I could actually go ahead and use JavaScript again if I wanted to create some pie charts to show the distribution of the areas in the milestone. However, I actually prefer the way Mermaid does their charts, so I'm going to show you how we can use Mermaid. I showed you earlier you can actually use Mermaid natively above, but you can actually use other kernels to dynamically send code to other kernels. So I can actually use C# to dynamically send code and generate Mermaid cells. So let me show you a little bit what that looks like. If I scroll down just a little bit further, you'll see that this is our last cell. There is actually nothing below this cell. However, if I run this C# cell, you're going to see it's going to pop up some Mermaid cells below. And so now we actually have 2 Mermaid cells. We're waiting on this last one here. And we were able to dynamically create Mermaid cells that will actually render these pie charts for us. And again, this is just because I prefer to use Mermaid. There is no right or wrong choice here. However, now that we have these, let me go ahead and show you what happens when I run them. So now we have these really, really nice pie charts done from Mermaid. This shows for our VS Code extension GA that the work that was done, 23 out of the 40 items are complete. 43% of them are from the VS Code extension area. These are, again, our labels that we use for recording purposes, which, makes sense. This is the VS Code extension GA milestone, so that makes sense. The next highest number is the 14%, which is around the variable sharing work that we've been doing. And these other areas have a smaller piece of the pie, but as an engineering team, it is nice for us to see where engineers have been spending their time. So let's run this other one as well. This one is now showing, obviously, the VS Code extension GA, the work that's actually left to do. 63% is still in that area VS Code extension, which again is making sense. However, our second largest area is actually 16%, which is showing as the getting started area. So this shows us that, as an engineering team, we need to go ahead and focus our area as well on the getting started experience before we GA. Last but not least, we have this last API stabilization work to do pie chart here. This one is a little bit almost more of a uniform distribution, of course, because there are so few items, but it is still nice to see that we can see the breakdown of where our engineering time will be spent when we do tackle this. So from a big picture perspective, this is a great way for our engineering team to kind of analyze the work that we've been doing and figure out if, we need to allocate resources in a different way, see if we're on track for our schedules. And notebooks are really, really helpful in being able to visualize and interpret and understand this information in a much more deep way. And that's it. We are nearing the end of our Polyglot Notebooks demo here. So you were able to see how by using .NET Interactive as the kernel for the Jupyter Notebook, you can mix languages, pass variables between them. We were able to use Mermaid, C#, JavaScript, and HTML to get a better understanding of where our engineering work is at and how we will be moving forward with our GA plans. So now if you actually go ahead and visit our documentation, I unfortunately won't have time to get into it in our session today, but if you visit our documentation, you can actually learn how you can use the .NET REPL to be able to automate these reports such that you can go ahead and schedule to run them and have this generated for you on a cadence that works for you and your team. So let me head back to the slides. We'll be wrapping up here in a minute. So obviously I've just shown you an example where you can use a notebook to kind of create some analytics around a GitHub repo to get an understanding of the trajectory of your project and how the engineering work is going. But you don't have to use notebooks only for, the analytical or kind of reporting space, if you will. You can also use notebooks for documentation. You can have runnable troubleshooting guides. You can be learning a new programming language, or even use them for just like some quick prototyping or testing if you just want to validate that something works. And then you can pull it into your app once you've tested that it works for you. And so last but not least, we want you to try out Polyglot Notebooks. I mentioned I would reiterate this again. So to get started, if you want to try them out, you can install VS Code, install the .NET 6 SDK, and install the Polyglot Notebooks extension. I've also linked in the slides, which should be available to you, where you can download the GitHub repo report notebook if you want to tweak it and try it out for your own to see how it's going. And I would love and encourage you guys to try out other language combinations and for the other use cases that we mentioned. So the notebook that I had obviously some Mermaid, C#, HTML, and JavaScript, but think about the other languages that we support: SQL, KQL, PowerShell, and go ahead and let us know if you are using these languages for the other use cases. And then if you are willing to give us some feedback, you can file issues and any feature requests here on the .NET Interactive GitHub repo. And we look forward to you guys trying it out and letting us know what you think. So I hope you enjoyed that overview, and thanks for joining .NET Conf. I'm going to go ahead and wait for my counterpart to join me for Q&A.
Absolutely awesome, Claudia. I love seeing all this new stuff in action. And actually, like you said, we have one of your teammates, John, here. I love John. Let's bring him in. Hey, John, how's it going?
Good. How are you doing?
Doing fantastic. All right, we did get some great questions in the chat, so keep them coming in. We've got a few minutes here. So actually, Cecil, who was just presenting, asks, what other options are there for diagramming in these Polyglot notebooks?
Sure. So we have quite a few options because it's Polyglot, right? So most of the visualizations that you're seeing are powered by JavaScript. And so you can pull things in directly in JavaScript. If there's a library for visualization like Plotly that's available on a CDN, you can pull that in via JavaScript and you can use it directly. You can share data in from other subkernels and visualize it from there. And that's basically what some of the .NET-based wrapper libraries are doing under the hood. Like there's Plotly.net, which is from the Plotly organization, and the Mermaid support that you see there as well is kind of orchestrating some of this for you underneath, but you can wire up pretty much any visualization library that you want as long as it's going to use JavaScript to render it at the end of the day.
Very cool. And we just missed out because I was zooming in on you, John. Claudia's cat walk across, which was fantastic. And we missed it. So hopefully the cat will walk across again.
We're well acquainted.
Good. Another question here for you real quick from Christian. Are type providers supported in F# cells?
So that's a good question. Not directly as far as I know, but there might be a way to do it. It's not something that I've tried. Now, if you have a type, there's a lot of ways to use any kind of .NET project where you're emitting an assembly. You can pull it in with $R by referencing the DLL directly. I don't know if you can actually declare a type provider inside of an F# cell. If you can declare a type provider inside of FSI, you can do it in .NET Interactive.
Okay, cool.
That's
now, I know that, Claudia, you didn't really cover this, but it's a good question, and you wrote a whole blog post on it that I post. But can you describe the difference between these Polyglot notebooks and the .NET Interactive notebooks?
So essentially they are the same. .NET Interactive Notebooks is the former name of our extension. I did write a blog post. We can probably link it in there. Oh, I see it's in there. Perfect. Thanks, James. So as we continued the exploration around developer workflows, we realized fundamentally a lot of them were polyglot and multi-language essentially. And so in pulling extra languages within .NET Interactive, we realized the name no longer reflected its capabilities and its language support. So we did update the name to Polyglot Notebooks. So the answer is technically the same. It's a new name for the extension.
Very cool. It's growing. It's expanding into all the things. And to that point, Christian here asks, can you interop with like Python or R in the same notebook? Is that a possibility?
It's interesting that you asked that. It is something we are looking into.
Okay, cool. Very cool. All right, last question here. Is it possible to actually embed these Polyglot notebooks or something like that into .NET applications?
It is. So not only can you embed it inside of a .NET application, you can interact with it from the notebook. And so you can use the notebook as an interactive scripting environment for the embedded kernel. So .NET Interactive, we have a bunch of libraries. You can reference one from within your project, and you can expose it over a named pipe and then hook it up using the #, connect magic command from your notebook. I'll post a link to a sample that lets you do this with the WPF app, and you can play around with the WPF app with IntelliSense into the application as it's running without having to reference the libraries. It's quite cool.
Very cool. All right. Well, we are at time. Claudia and John, thank you so much for joining in for the amazing session. I love this stuff because I've been using the interactive notebooks for a long time. So I'm excited to see how the Polyglot notebooks open a wide range for every single developer out there, no matter what they're using. Thank you all for joining and have an absolutely amazing night.
Awesome. Thank you. Bye, everyone.